Hello, welcome to a look at storytelling in your brand and in your business. I'm Dante St James. Thank you for joining me today, whether it's the morning or the afternoon, wherever you are in Australia. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I know we've had some challenges over the last few months with rain and storms and floods and famine. So hoping that wherever you are in Australia, life is going well and your business is growing and thriving as well. Let's get that screen shared and get it underway. And as we do that, just a reminder, this is a live session on Zoom. So if you're on the live session, please feel free to put your comments into the Q&A or the chat window. I can see all those as we're going through. And if you are on the YouTube recording afterwards, please just put your details down the bottom in the comments so that we can come back to those when we get a chance to do that. And by the way, if you want to follow along all of our different things on YouTube, it's at youtube.com /at business station, a little at squiggle sign, business station, or on my own one, which is youtube.com /at Dante St James. Let's get ourselves underway. What we're going to look at today is what a business story is and why you probably need to think about having one of your own. We're going to look at what the storytelling framework is, which is called the SB7 or StoryBrand 7-step framework. And it's going to explain how to sort of not just tell the ultimate story of your business, but also be able to take all these little mini stories that attribute to every stage of that customer journey and helps to tell that customer that, number one, who you are, number two, what you do, number three, why they should care that you do that, because ultimately you want to be able to help them solve their problems. And we're going to have a look at some finding your own story. So we've got quite a few people on the call today. So we won't be able to cover everyone's story, but I'll be hopefully get a chance a little bit later on to be able to wind in your story and see if we can get some stories that may make sense. So when you get a chance, if you can just tell me what your business does in the webinar chat window, that'd be fantastic. And that'll let me sort of frame the stories around what you do, not just these stories, say from the big guys like Apple and Nike and all those guys. We want to be able to make it very, very personalized to who you are and what you do. This is brought to you by Business Station and the Digital Solutions Program, which you would know all about because you're on this call. So thank you for being part of that. I hope it's you've got some really great value out of that. And if you haven't yet used your 3 hours of one-to-one coaching, I encourage you to get onto that. And I'll have some details at the end of the webinar to help you to get that started. My own background is in as a Business Station advisor, but also with Workforce Australia's self-employment services, which is we're helping people to basically start their own businesses. The Be Connected program through the Australian government is a way of connecting older Australians with the digital economy. And I'm also working in Google's Digital Springboard project, which is, again, getting to more disadvantaged people the ability to engage with digital tools today. And finally, also a certified lead trainer with Meta. There's only 5 of us in Australia. I'm very proud to be one of those and really enjoy the work that I do with Meta as well. So branding. What is a brand story? What does this all mean? What does it actually have to say for people who want to be able to better tell the story about what they do and better connect with those customers who could benefit the very most from what they're offering? So in 2020, back when we were all young and fresh and hoping that the world was going to at least survive a rather large pandemic, which seems to be in our past, but still has shadows on what we are doing now. Back in 2020, we had a situation where people were all, very, very obvious about the way they were calling people into action with their businesses. They'd have very obvious call to action, like buy my stuff, book my course, join my tribe, download my ebook, join my Facebook group. It was all very aggressive and trying to get people to just go and do my thing. And what that was, the problem with that is, and you think, it's obvious if you tell someone to book your course, they're more likely to book your course, right? Or you want them to buy your stuff, put your stuff in front of them and say, hey, here it is, buy it. You'd think that would work. But for those of us who are more around services and not so much retail products, we were finding that this ultimately just wasn't working and no one was making any money out of it. Just running these sales funnels and all these highly manipulative tricks. What was happening? All of us were getting a bit too smart for those tricks. The sales funnels weren't working anymore. The emails constantly going to people's mailboxes just weren't getting opened. We were finding that the social media posts we were doing, hadn't really been seeing much reaction traction for those since 2017. No one seemed to see anything we were posting. So we're using all these sort of roundabout ways of doing it, trying to post from our profiles in the hope that one of our friends would see it and pass it on to someone else. And we all just ended up looking like a bunch of network marketers, constantly trying to sell something that no one wants at a price that no one wants to pay. So we kind of got ourselves into a bit of a funk. How do we do something better, something newer, something that's going to be, well, perhaps a little bit more gentle for some of us that are in, working very closely with people. I can see that Cameron's working with entrepreneurs in Central Queensland. Lorna's working with a mindfulness and coaching and personal development models. So these are very personal things. These are things that are not like going down to the shop and buying milk and deciding, oh, well, it costs $2 less at Coles, I'm going to go there instead. These are decisions that people need time to make. They need to feel safe to make those decisions. And throwing up all these manipulative funnels and manipulative messages and using all the all the psychic tricks that we can possibly pull out, and all the funny words that we know are action words to try gently, well, not so gently nudge. We want to push them into a relationship with them. Nothing gentle about it. And you can see in the last couple of years that most of the websites that these businesses are using now are certainly going for something a little bit different. What we're seeing is a lot less of those long sales pages we were getting back in 2019, 2020, and more gentle ways of inviting people into a relationship with us. So what we had to do was to kind of get past this fact that we didn't really want to spend money on ads. Let's face it, none of us do. We all hate advertising ourselves. So the idea of spending ad money to try and get people in kind of left a poor taste in our mouths. And to be frank, a lot of us tried advertising on Facebook. A lot of us tried advertising on Google. It chewed up a lot of money and got us nothing. We might have even gone so far, if we really, really splashed out, to put ourselves on local TV or radio and found that, well, at the local area wasn't quite enough for what we were doing. Not enough people locally needed what we did, or at least they didn't think they needed it. They didn't see it as appropriate or relevant to them. And we started then thinking, well, maybe it's just me. I just don't know what I'm doing. So I'll get an agency onto it. And so what we did, we paid twice the amount, because when you pay an agency, at least 50% of what you're paying to them is their fee, and the rest of it goes to ads. So I've had cases where I've worked with people who have paid an agency to do Facebook ads. And what happened, they were paying about $1,200 a month. What they were only getting from that agency was about $400 of actual ad spend. So they were paying those other guys, $800 to manage the account, but they're only getting $400 worth of ads. So that's a really nasty it's a really nasty result. It just means that people are not in the position to be able to have control of what they're doing. And I've had horror stories ever since of people trying to unhitch themselves from these agencies who have taken over their Facebook accounts, taken over their Instagram accounts, deleted things, locked them out of their own accounts. There's some horror stories that go on with it. So we kind of got burnt by that. So some of us decided, well, it's time for us to get louder and more aggressive in what we're doing. We needed to, develop the mindset that says, I'm a winner, I'm a champion, and I'm going to basically yell my way into people's wallets. And of course, it didn't work, because the louder you yell online, the more ignored you're going to be. Sure, there might be some people who agree with you, but they're not necessarily people who are in a position to buy from you or to book you or to order from you. So what we were finding is that we were yelling louder and louder and trying to get more aggressive and more direct and more targeted towards what we do, and we got ignored. And so what ended up happening for a lot of us, we just gave up on it. I said, no more, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm out. I just can't do this. And a lot of people would give up on their businesses, give up on their ideas, because they just fell into a massive hole. They weren't in a position to be able to dig themselves out. They'd spent money, they'd spent time, they'd spent all the effort they had, and it showed nothing. Nothing ever grew. So what we were looking for then is a way to sort of cut through, some way. How do we cut through without yelling? How do we cut through in a way that's going to be effective, but doesn't really have this whole I'm yelling at you to buy my stuff thing going on? We wanted a way for people to feel a bit more connected to us, particularly in the services. There's tons of people out there who do what we do. We might have our very specific niche way of doing it, but the reality is a coach is a coach. A personal development professional is a personal development professional. A career coach is a career coach. They're all pretty much the same. And even so, copywriters is copywriters. So you go, well, what's my difference? How can I sort of make people feel like they want to work specifically with me, not just with a copywriter, not just with a coach, not just with an educator? And what is something I can do that won't cost a fortune to do? It's not going to, lead to me having to buy a $3,000 program or spend $1,200 a month on ads, or won't have me trying to, buy a lead generation person to just generate leads and find that none of those leads are even appropriate, or none of them can afford what I'm doing. And you wanted to be something that we can follow, something we can follow along and replicate over and over again, so that it doesn't, it doesn't get tired, it doesn't get repetitive, it doesn't get boring. It actually has a bit more to say than just buy my stuff, book my time, and download my emails, or download my ebook. We wanted something a little bit better than that. So what we came up with was that we need to have some kind of storytelling in there, because basically between all of us who are working in education, all of us working in copywriting, all of us working in web design, graphic design, in life coaching and mindset mastery, we're all the same as everyone else is doing all that. I quite famously always say about what I do is there's nothing that I know that you can't Google. So how do I differentiate myself? How do I make myself stand out to get enough people who want to get into my webinars, or want to, actually have one-to-one consultations with me, to be able to actually get connected with me specifically, not just with people who do what I do? And the difference is some kind of story, because none of us wants to be advertised and sold to. We find it offensive. It's not like we walk through, we go flicking through our Facebook feed and love those ads that are coming up that's telling us to buy something, because we're not interested in it. Or we watch television and we go, oh my God, the ads. I was just using Snapchat the other day, and I forgot, I hadn't used Snapchat for a while, but a friend of mine said, oh, we should chat on Snapchat. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go back in there again. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll go to the Explore tab and actually see some of the cool things, the productions they've got in there. And I got in there, and every 60 seconds there's an ad. So it's like watching TV, but every minute they then go and do a 15-second ad. It was absolutely horrific. I lasted to the first ad and I went, I can't watch this anymore, because it was just, I hate being sold to, especially with products that have nothing to do with anything I like. And what was advertised on Snapchat was utterly irrelevant to the person I am. It was so ridiculously irrelevant that it was offensive. So we don't want to be uninteresting, because everything that businesses say and do is ultimately uninteresting, unless maybe it's to a bargain hunter who's looking for a saving on something, or it could be someone who has a very defined interest in travel or makeup or fashion, and there are ads that actually match what they're doing. Because we tend to think things are a lot more premium when they're a lot more relevant to what we're doing. If they're not relevant to us, we don't think them as premium. We think of it as cheap, junky ads. But the problem is everything looks the same out there. Businesses are really boring on social media, because we talk about buy this, download that. It's always about get them through to a call to action quickly, get them to do something. And we're hoping that the numbers on social media will help us to do that. Oh my God, there's 3 billion people on Facebook. There's 1 billion people on TikTok. I'm just going to put my message out there, and if it gets in front of that many people, maybe someone will like what I do. But of course, the social media platforms are very smart. They're not going to prioritize boring messages that are irrelevant. Remember, things that are premium are things that are relevant. So things that are wanted to be seen, things that are relevant to that person. So the algorithms are designed to boot out all the stuff that's irrelevant and only let through the stuff that's most relevant. So that's why I keep going back to Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, because everything that's coming through is highly relevant to what I'm doing. Snapchat's not so relevant, but it's because I barely ever use it. They don't really know much about me. They don't know what I like and what I hate. They just know a few things I've clicked on over the last few years that I really regretted clicking on, because I never clicked on those same kinds of things again. And what we don't understand is that our competitor isn't another coach. Our competitor isn't necessarily another copywriter, another web designer, another personal trainer. Our competitor is every other option that they've got for spending the money that we want them to spend with us. So if it takes $1,200 to work with you, you're up against everything that $1,200 could buy. So the priorities might be on survival. The priorities might be on paying bills that month. The priorities might be Christmas, because they need to buy presents for kids. The priority might be just simply getting by. I know it's this start of the year has been a bloody tough one for me because over the Christmas period, people aren't really engaging with what I do much. And then what happens, February hits and everyone comes flying in like a waterfall and it's much better. But those dry seasons, whew, I tell you what, they really do hurt because your competitor is everything. Money is not being spent on advice. It's not being spent on businesses. It's being spent on holidays. It's being spent on kids. It's being spent on all those things we have to spend on because we think that there's this bucket of money that everyone has that they want to spend on their personal development or they want to spend on this. The reality is that money could go to anything that's a priority at that time. So we kind of need to insert ourselves into their lives as some kind of priority. And you're not going to do that with a banner that says, download this now. Otherwise, your life is going to end. We're not going to manipulate our way in there. What we're going to do is basically get people to know us, understand us. Through that, they'll end up liking us, or hopefully, if you've got that kind of personality that people like. And then finally, that they'll trust us enough to make that purchase or make that jump, or at least to make the inquiry towards us. We're told that these days, it used to be about 8 touch points. It take about 8 touch points for someone to actually work with you. These days it's more like 30. So you've got about 30 to 38 different touch points that might take them. It might be multiple times they've seen an ad, multiple times they've seen your post, multiple times they've seen a comment coming up on LinkedIn that's attributed to you. So little micro touch points that are branded as you and that fit in with your overall brand of who you are, so that they can recognize that when they do finally need what it is you have to sell, then they remember you as the person to go to first, or at least in the top 3 to 5 choices of what they have to go in. So how do we do that? Well, we have to go through something like a story. And the story isn't just something which you go, well, I started my business back then, and this is where we were, this is where we are. So yeah, buy my stuff. That's how a lot of us tend to approach this story, because no one's really telling us how to write stories, particularly in the context of business. They're really just saying to us, oh, you've got to do stories. That's the thing you've got to do. And we're like, okay, that's great. We love the fact we've got to tell stories, but for the love of all things holy and nice, would you tell us how to write that story? Because it's hard, because we're not storytellers necessarily. Most of us are just really good practitioners at what we do, and we've built a business around that, but we're not really able to tell the story of that because we're not marketers. And to be honest, most marketers aren't good storytellers either. So one of the discoveries I made in 2020 was I was introduced to this StoryBrand framework by a guy called Donald Miller. And the starting point is a book called Building a StoryBrand. And the book is excellent. It's got amazing examples. It really is it's great to work with. And it changed my life and my whole approach to marketing, because I finally saw something that addressed all those issues I was talking about, how we don't like being advertised to. We don't like being manipulated. We don't really like businesses are boring. We're really terrible at telling stories, but we seem to be really good at just saying, buy my stuff. How do we work around that? It's not going to cost a lot to do it. It's not going to take a hell of a lot of upskilling and learning. You can probably learn it in a 1-hour webinar, which is why we're here. So the StoryBrand framework works in a kind of like a hero's journey thing. You think of this as the journey of Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, or maybe Harry Potter in the Harry Potter movies, or even like Liz in Eat, Pray, Love, if you've ever seen that movie or read that book. It's kind of this very similar journey that this person has a problem. They meet a guide who gives them a plan of action, and they call that particular person into action in a specific way that makes them want to go, yeah, I'm going to go with you. And it helps them to avoid failure, which is the ultimate thing we want to do, because failure, we're more afraid of failure than we are hopeful of success, if that makes sense. Think about it. You lose $100, you drop it in a gutter somewhere and you'd never see that $100 again. You beat yourself up for weeks about that, just going, oh my goodness, I feel so bad. I feel so terrible. All the things that $100 could have got me. But if you found that $100, you got this one moment of jubilation where you go, yes, and then you go and spend it and it's gone. And you don't really think of it much again. So we're more afraid of failure than we are hopeful of success. So the hope of success is kind of like this secondary thing. But what we really do, we're risk averse. We don't like failure, and we don't want to be seen to be failures. So we do everything we possibly can to avoid it, so that ultimately we'll end up in a success. But we need to acknowledge that a lot of people, or pretty much everyone, is coming from that fear of failure point of view. So I'll go through that again. A customer has a specific set of problems. They meet a guide, which spoiler alert, that's you, who gives them a plan that calls them into action, into doing something about that problem and with you, and it helps them avoid the failure that they're fearing and helps them get the success that they are quietly hoping for. So we break that down into parts. We start off with the customer. So the customer, who is the customer? Who is your ideal customer? Are they women between 25 and 39, men from 45 to 55? Are they youth? Are they workers? What specific person is your customer? Now, you've probably heard this carping on from so many different people, but it's no longer enough to say that anyone who needs copywriting services, anyone who needs a website, anyone who needs great quality single origin coffee, it's not that. We've got to get a bit more specific, because we're about to tell a story that's going to appeal to a very specific kind of person. Now, you might have a corner store, and therefore your target customer is pretty much everyone in that neighborhood who can walk to or easily drive to that store. But specifically, these are people who tend to not really care too much about spending money on the things they need to. Like they'll spend $2 more on a bottle of milk than what they would at the supermarket. So there's still, even in the most general businesses, a kind of specific kind of person who's going to be attracted to that. And then what we look at is, what do they find important and valuable in their lives? Now, not just in the context of what we do, because we can certainly go down the path where we go, well, you know, they find it very valuable to have really good writing on their website, or they might find it very, very valuable to be able to, you know, perform at a much higher level in their business, or they might find it very valuable to have the right kind of mindset that's going forward into their life, or they want to find some peace. And we go, well, think about the bigger picture. What are the things that are really important to that woman between 25 and 39, or that man between 45 and 55, or that young person who's just graduated from school? What are the things that are truly important to them? And get broad. We're not talking about what's related to you. We're talking about what's in their life. What are the things that they find valuable? And then think about, if they had the problem that relates to what you do, why would they choose you over a competitor? What is it that you could present, or you could actually put in front of them, that would make them go, I want to work with her. She's the one I want to work with, rather than just, oh, I don't know, just pick one, go to Google and pick one out. What's going to lead them to you? So first of all, really nailing down who your target customer is, what they find important and valuable in their lives. So think about that mum between 25 and 39. What is the important thing in her life? Yes, her kids. Yeah, but there's other things too. She's also got a career that's important to her. Her hobbies, her friend circle, her ability to be able to grow and learn and have further education. Those things will be valuable as well. How do those things then fit to you as a provider? Well, that's what you've got to work out. This helps us to start that very story. And probably the best example of this storytelling I could probably find is through Apple. So Apple are brilliant at this. They've been doing this for a very long time. This will take us back to the mid-2000s, where they defined that their customer for the Macintosh, for the computer, is a hipster creative. So someone who's like cool, casual, calm, kind of like the cool person that sits at the cafe, opens up their computer. And you notice this when you go to any cafe and you see people on computers, how many of them have the Apple logo on the back of them. The cool people seem to have Macs, and that's who they were targeting. And people who saw themselves as kind of cool, or wanted to be associated as cool. So they position themselves as, instead of the dowdy old man in the three-piece suit, they put themselves as the cool, young, hip, creative person who gets work done anywhere they need to. What we call them now is maybe a digital nomad, or someone who works from home or has hybrid working arrangements. Someone who's a bit out of the, not really in the mainstream of corporate Australia. They're kind of a little bit to the left of center, or a little bit to the right of center, where they're not quite the everyday person. They're not the person who catches a train to work every morning. They're the kind of person who doesn't wear leather shoes. They wear sneakers. That's the kind of person they were saying, these are the people who we reckon want Macs. Now, do they have the money to buy Macs? Doesn't matter. These people are aspirational. They want to be seen as cool. So their story became about this hipster creative and who this person is and what the things are that they want and they need. And then they presented then the Macintosh computer range as an answer to those problems, as an answer to what those people are looking for. So no longer do we get sort of in this position where if you get the Mac, you're just like everyone else. You were different. You were somehow cooler if you had the Mac. And that's sort of by positioning them as the cool option, it's grown Apple into what it is today, regardless of the iPhone or regardless of iPads and AirPods and all sorts of other things that Apple makes now. This was all about making them cool. The Apple thing was cool because it was rebellious. It was different. It was a little bit, creative rather than meaningless and soul destroying. You had the Apple computer. Oh, you must be very creative. And of course, their computers were made for a lot of creative work, for graphic design, for movie generation, all that kind of thing. So you can think of, okay, what is it about you that you could position as cool or useful or something that fits into the aspirations of your customer? They told their story as, we're the option for cool people. You want to be the cool people? They didn't say that they were cool. They just positioned that guy on the right, Justin Long, as the cool person, as opposed to the guy on the left who just looks like every corporate executive in a Sydney tower block. So they wanted to make sure that's who they were telling that story to. The second step is that this customer has a problem. And that's where we explore what problems the hero or the customer has and how it affects their life and what it means to them if they can't solve that problem. So we look at, okay, what are the problems that the customer have? In Apple's case, the customer might have had a problem with being seen as cool. They might have had a problem with getting things done. They might have had a problem with trying to overcome certain tasks. In your case, it could be that the problems are unable to get writing on their website, which makes sense to people in a really clear way. I'm unable to get past this block, which will help them grow their business. Or they might be saying, I'm about to go out of business if I don't hurry up and grow this thing and scale it up to a much bigger level. So there's different problems they have. And you go beyond just the problems and say, what are those problems causing? Stress, sleepless nights, the inability to be able to connect with their kids because they're always working, the inability for them to enjoy the things in life they want to enjoy because they're always working, always chasing their tail, always chasing that white rabbit to get that next client. And so we're going beyond the problems that we can see as symptoms, and we see then what the real outcome is in their life. So for the cool hipster creative in Apple's vision and their story, the problem was that the computers that were out there for all the oldies had, they didn't do what they needed them to do. They needed to be able to open this thing up and get to work. They didn't have time to battle the system and fiddle around with settings and all that kind of thing. And in Apple's case, they had another very recent iPhone campaign just a couple of years ago, where again, a very hip person, it was in an ad, and they were basically, everyone's bidding for their data. So the good guys, the bad guys, the high corporates, the billionaires are all competing to buy their data and what they actually do. And iPhone's like, your problem is that your data is being sold, but we're the privacy company. iPhone is the private option. It lets you not be tracked if you choose not to, because today privacy is a priority. And so Apple got on board that and said, okay, well, what we do, we give you more privacy than what an Android phone would do. An Android phone, everything's trackable. This is Google. They track everything. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to track you and sell off your data. Now, the sideline of that is they still do track you, every single thing you do on your phone. But what they do is they only use it to sell ads in their app store at the moment. So yes, they're still using it to use ads, but it's their ads on their system, not everyone else's ones. They've stopped everyone else from being able to get that data, but now they've got all the data, and they're now using it to target ads on app stores and in podcasts and in the bookstore that they've got and their music store as well, so that they can say, oh, okay, we know what you're all about. But they still position them again as the hip creative, not the old and the not the old billionaire, or not the man in the three-piece suit, and not the woman who looks like she's the corporate monster, or the Russian oligarch who's trying to buy your stuff to be able to rip you off. No, they're the hip guy with the hip phone. Now, this is when Apple is already a very, very dominant company when it comes to selling phones. So the story that we're telling here is that, we're going to be privacy oriented for you. And we know that you, young hipster creative, want to be private as well. And you're probably going to tell your parents and your families about this, because we know that they want to be private as well, because privacy is the ultimate thing we want to get. The enemy is not private. So that's another story you get to tell. The next story is where they meet you. And this is where you show them that you're trustworthy enough to work with. So you've got a reputation that's really good. You've built over a number of years. You've got credibility because you've done all this stuff before. You've got value to them. You've actually got something they really want. And that guide has to really carry those things. And the main things are credibility and empathy. So the empathy side of it is that you get them, you get where they're coming from, you understand what it is they want, and you understand why they want it, and you articulate that straight back to them. And so one of the stories you can tell is around that, hey, we get it. Getting through life is hard. Adulting is hard. And sometimes you get yourself in a bit of a hole, and we've got sort of a way that can help to dig you back out of that. But the first thing you did there, rather than saying, here's my solution, here's the way to dig out, you go into the problem, explaining and articulating the problem that they have, because that helps them to relate to it. And it makes them want to then listen to what the credibility you have is. Oh, yeah, so you understand who I am? Well, how can I trust you? Oh, you've done all this. Okay, I can see your work. I can see examples of your work. Okay, I feel a bit better about all that now. That feels good. Okay, what about the value though? The value then is what value you bring to their lives. Remember all those problems they had in the previous one, the person who has a problem? Well, we're now in a position where we're addressing those problems, the real problems they're having that are relevant to them in our story. So Apple does that via Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was, well, as it says, literally the personification of who the guide is. He was, while he wasn't young and a hipster, he was certainly a hipster when the hipster was first a hipster. So he was, a rebel. He was a different thinker. He thought in terms of marketing. He thought in terms of of changing the world and making the world a better place. He was a hippie from way back. He was all about alternative medicines, all that kind of stuff. So with him, he was like the guy that people trusted, because he was a guy who overcame the problems to make things simpler in computing, to make things simpler with the phone, to make things more effective, the one who answered the questions of that target market. And he was regarded as having credibility because he'd been doing it for 30 years. And he'd also been able to make billions of dollars for himself. He was successful. He stood up as the successful example. Love him or hate him, and apparently he was an absolute monster to work with. He was certainly someone who did change the world, especially in our worlds where, most of us have an Apple thing in our lives at some point. I've got an Apple Mac in front of me. I haven't got an iPhone, but I've got an iPad. I've got Apple AirPods to listen through on my computer as well. So I've got Apple stuff through my life, even though I'm not really an Apple guy. Why do I get it? Because the computers are so much simpler to use. Open it up, get to work, not constantly battling the system every time there's some kind of update. So with that, your story is around, okay, well, who are you as the guy? This is where you talk about yourself. Okay, who are you? Why should someone trust you? And why should they even care enough to trust you? Because they're not going to trust you just because I've got all these certifications. I've done this, I've done that. I've helped 13,000 people help them in their businesses. Any of that sort of stuff is falling on deaf ears unless you can first show that you have some empathy for where that person is at. So they wouldn't be coming to see you on your website or on your social media unless they had a very specific problem that you work with. So when we talk about those problems, then we then go, okay, you've got all these problems. I've got these solutions over here. Do you want to hear about those? Oh, by the way, before I do, here's, kind of my backstory. Here's why you can trust me to be able to deliver with you, because I've delivered for other people as well. Next one is the guide gives them a plan. And you do this by showcasing what your benefits are first. It says features and benefits, but I say benefits first. So what are the things that what the benefits they can gain by working with you? So that story can be simply sharing stories of people you've helped. So this person wanted to be able to do this, and the benefit was by working with us, they could do this, 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 and this. You're not talking about everything you do. That's just a list of features. It's like going to a car yard and the guy comes out and says, oh, it's got this, it's got this, it's got this, it's got this, it's got this. And all you want to know is that you can easily be able to strap the kids into the back seat without them being in danger. And also that your cup holder for your latte and your Yeti mug it's going to fit in the cup holder without spilling over, right? You've got really simple requirements out of what a car does, but the salesman will just focus in on these things that you go, I don't care what this is. I'm never going to use it. And does it start? Does it stop? Does it connect by my phone to YouTube, to Bluetooth easily? Just those things that we're like, how does this make my life easier? Because I need to be able to do this in my day. And does this help me to do that? Or does it just make me annoyed every time I hop in that car that I have to do this and do that? And I just want everything to just work, right? So that's the benefits of it, how you solve the problem. And most importantly, I'd say it's how they can work with you. Give them a plan of how to work with you. I tell a story all the time about catering. My first big event that I catered for, 150 people. I went on the internet, looked around a bunch of places in Darwin and said, okay, catering in Darwin. And there's all these places that said, we do catering, all these cafes that say, we do catering. But every one of them said, give us a call. That wasn't like any downloadable menus. It was like, give us a call and talk about catering. I'm like, I don't have time for the call. And plus, the only time I get a time to make that call is at lunchtime, because I'm doing other things. I'm working during the rest of it. But what's the last time that any caterer or any cafe wants you to be calling that? Is during rush times like lunch, right? So of course, if I'd called by lunch, they'd all hate me for it. So can you call back at 3? I'm like, I can't. I have to talk now. So the whole problem came that the only place that actually gave me a clear path of how to work with them was Subway. Subway, of all things. They were the only place that said, step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this. And I'm like, thank you. So everyone got to eat subs and cookies at my event. No one complained, I guess, but it would have been nice to have something a bit higher end than just Subway, right? But they made it simple for me. I didn't have to talk to anyone. I wasn't forced to call anyone at a time they didn't want to talk. I didn't have to sort of, when you call businesses and you almost have to justify your reason for calling them because you feel stupid for interrupting their day. Well, that's a fear I've got over the phone, at least. Where I can get away with not calling someone, I just won't. I'll do everything I can not to call them. But the problem is, though, I'm not going to get to those catering services. Now, I could look at that and go, well, too bad. If you're too lazy to ring me, then maybe you're not the kind of customer I want. I'd go and say then, you're leaving a lot of money on the table then. If you're just going to be sort of gearing everything you do to people who do the things you want them to do, then you're possibly missing out on a lot of people in a scarce market that's highly commoditized in everything that we're doing. Then there's lots of competitors that do it. Wouldn't we do the thing that makes it easier for them to work with us? Yeah, sure. Some people are going to pick up the phone, and that's great. I can't receive phone calls during the day because I'm in consultations and webinars all day. So for me, that's useless, having just a call option. Even an email option is, well, what you find is you send the email and you won't hear from them for 3 weeks. And they come back and say, oh, hopefully you're still looking for this. And like, dude, it was like 2 weeks ago. What are you doing? So it's giving people the option to work with you in the easiest possible way. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. Step 4, this is the outcome. So it then links people to something that's easy for them to understand of how to work with you, even if it involves a phone call. Articulate that and say, step 1, download our menu. Step 2, call us and let us know the time, the date, what you're actually looking for from the menu. Step 3, the day comes, we'll send you a message to let you know when we'll be in and what time it's going to be dropped in. And step 4, you have your event and everyone leaves happy and they don't have any complaints about the food. So those steps are like a really important thing. Apple, does this in their way by differentiate themselves between the hard way and the easy way, the complex way or the simple way. And they did that with their very early range of MacBook laptops, where they were saying basically all this stuff you have to plug in, all these things you've got to attach, and they're all heavy and they take up space, and they're these are not an ideal thing to do. But the easy way is everything's built in. It's like the whole thing about a Mac has always been, is open it up and you get to work. You don't have to battle a system and plug this in over here and plug this in over here, and just doesn't seem to work together, because Apple makes all the stuff. They can make sure it works together in the most seamless way possible. Now, if things go wrong with Apple, it's horrid, but things don't tend to go that wrong with Apple, really, unless you're one of the 1 in a million people who got an iPhone that happened to do things it wasn't supposed to do. So their thing was by saying, okay, we've got the easy way, and we've articulated it out, the easy way to work with an Apple a MacBook Pro. So what are your steps? Think about that. That's part of your story, is on your website, having a bar which has step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. That's a story. That's a story of working with you. And then we say that guide now calls that person into action. So we often think of the call to action, or the CTA. It's been reduced down to an acronym now. That the CTA, the call to action, is things like book me, buy me, subscribe to this, download that. It's all about taking a direct action. And that's what I guess a lot of solopreneurs that I'm assuming most of us in here sort of fit into that category. People who are sole traders, or we have companies, but we are the sole managing director of those companies. We work for ourselves. We're self-employed. So that's very common for us to do that. But it's not that convincing because I see a book me now and I'm like, I'm not ready to book with you yet. God, I've only just met you. I don't really even think we're at that stage yet. Or buy this now. It's like, well, again, I've just met you. I'm not going to just buy it because your website says a button that says buy it, or even a subscription button, which is like, I'll subscribe. I'm like, well, I still don't have enough information to work with. So what's the alternative to those calls to action? And you will have all those on your website, and you will have mentions of that in your social media, but you also have to earn the right to ask someone that. You can't just assume that everyone who gets to your website is at that point of their journey where they're ready to make the decision now. We want them to because we want the sale, but we also have to have the courage to build a pipeline. And a pipeline might take a month or 3 months, or in my case, sometimes a year and a half for that person to convert. In the case of recently, someone who needed a website, it's taken a year and a half to get finally back to me and say, yeah, we're ready to go. Let's do this. But I still want that pipeline, right? A year and a half pipeline is great. It fits in with all the people who've come in since then. I can schedule it out. I can factor in the amount of work I've got ahead of me. So we go, okay, we think of that as book me now, buy this now, subscribe this. What's the alternative? People like Apple tend to use something a bit bigger. Their call to action is transcendent. So when I say transcendent, it's not a direct thing. It's a thought. It's an idea. It's a feeling. And that thing is think different. And that's something they've carried around with them for many, many, many years. Now they're not the different option; they're the common option now. So their transcendent ideas are more about, getting more work done faster or things like that. That's their call to action. But it's not a call to action to say buy an Apple computer. It's saying think different. We're associating ourselves with different. We're associating ourselves with that different feeling, the feeling of accomplishment, a bit of status in there too, a little bit of smugness. The guy who opens up his laptop in the cafe that's from Apple feels a little bit more superior than the person who opens up the Dell or the HP or the Acer or the Asus. They feel a little bit superior. I've got the Mac, I paid a little bit more for this. I'm the creative alternative person because I opened up the Mac. So that's the kind of call to action they have. Now, the calls to action on their website can be things like they assume that people want what they have. They don't have to have loud calls to action because they assume you're already there. You want this, right? We know you want this. So what we're doing is calling you to think about something. To your story then becomes about what are you asking someone to feel? What are you asking them to do that would put them into that zone of the kind of person that you want to work with? So it could be something as simple as, if you're, I'll take one of your examples here. We've got Lorna, who's a mindfulness coaching and personal development using the ACT model. Don't know what that is, but thank you. You can clarify that if you want to. But I was like, let's just look at the mindfulness coaching side of it. We already know because you hear that you're after mindfulness. You want to be able to still your mind enough so you can actually perform better, be better rested, to be more capable and more able to work with the things that are going on in your life. So you go, well, okay. So what are the calls to action I'd have there? The calls to action would be less about book my course. It'd be less about book my time. It'd be about, think mindfully. Could be one of those little mini stories you have. The story could be of people who have taken on mindfulness in their lives. So again, stories, it will speak much more louder than book my course, book my workshop, and be something more like, be the best you can in every part of your life. I do mindfulness myself. And for me, it's made me so much more efficient and capable as someone who works, but it's also given me a lot of peace in my personal life. So I'm one of those examples you could use of someone who's gone through this process. So rather than book me, give them a reason to want to go and look for where to book you. Make it obvious where to book from, but give them something of a story that sort of tells why they should work with you. Now we get to this big one, which is all about that plan that helps them to avoid failure. What you can do here is, as part of your story, you're telling, these are the things that can go wrong if you don't work with me. Now, I know that sounds horribly manipulative, but they are very real things. If you don't take on mindfulness, then you're going to lose more time. You're going to be less focused on the things that matter, and you're going to be all over the place. The monkey brain is going to continually keep you going for sparkly objects all the time. The consequences are that you don't get any better. You don't engage with life any better than what you have now. Nothing changes. Actually, what happens is the problems of your life grow bigger and bigger and bigger because you don't take this step. So you don't have to just articulate what the hopeful future is. You've got to articulate what the problem is if they don't work with you. If they refuse to work with you, then what's going to happen in their life? You're not threatening anybody. What you're saying is this is just a natural progression of this. You've obviously shown an interest in mindfulness. You're at my website. You're in my social media. So here's what can happen if you don't actually go forward with this. There are consequences to inaction in the same way as there are consequences to action. The consequences to action are probably pretty good. They're in the next slide. But the consequences of inaction, this is where you tell that story. If you you tell a real story about something, you tell a story from your own experience. They're the most powerful ones. The story could be, for so many years, I looked at things like meditation and mindfulness as this woo. It's all very religious and all very, I didn't want to be, bowing before, gods with 8 arms and blue skin. I just didn't see that in my life. I felt it was really, really stupid. But I did want, to be a better performer in what I do. I did want to be a better person. So in order to do all that, I needed to be doing something. The consequences of doing nothing meant that I would just get worse at what I was doing. I become less efficient, less effective. So I had to do something about that until eventually I did do some mindfulness work with someone, and that has made a big difference in my life. So the Apple way of doing this is that they show that they sort of had this Super Bowl ad which had a hero going with a big hammer to smash through the what was like the George Orwell 1984 kind of thing, where she would go through to smash the screen of the overbearing hierarchy and patriarchy that was holding her back, the hero, the customer, from these big bad businesses, and that would help her to avoid the failure. So the avoidance of the failure was that she had the power to do this, and the assumption was if she didn't do it, she'd be in that bleak world of the big business driving what she's going to be. Now, it's quite ironic now because Apple is the big business. They are the overbearing patriarchy of their own. Then we look at, okay, finally we've got that out of the way. We've been able to tell the story about what there's possibly things that can go wrong. Now we talk about the success. What is the transformation that the customer is going to happen through this? What are the differences in their life? What is the new meaning they'll have, the new abilities they'll have? What does the world look like when you've solved their problem? When they've gone through with it, the world looks so much better. There's hope, and there's new life, and there's new energy, and there's new opportunities, there's new growth. They'll finally get to take a day off on the weekend if they're able to finally get their systems and processes in place in the way they need them to. So that success thing, yes, that's the hope of the future. But first of all, what we had to do is address what the consequences were. So we've told that story. Now we're telling the story of what it looks like. It's much more credible now because we've painted the picture of what the future's like without you. Now we paint the future what it is with you. It feels so much better. It lands better now because you've already told the story of how it looks bad. So for instance, today, the hope for the future is that Apple is showcasing their camera technology, that you can film a movie or a TV show with an iPhone in this cinematic mode. And the examples they showed, and some of the examples I've seen from real people are just stunning. It's beautiful. Some of the stuff is just gorgeous. The outcome for them is you'll be able to make a movie or a TV show on an iPhone in this particular cinematic mode. So the real transformation that's going on is success. And the entire commercial was actually built around what the success looks like. So they did it in the form of, this is a movie or a TV show episode that was filmed using an iPhone. That's what you can do. Imagine if you're able to do that. You could change everything. You could be a success on YouTube. You can be a success on TikTok just by having an iPhone. So that's the hope of a better future. So I've used quite a lot of your examples in there so far. I guess what I might do is, so now I've got the idea of who you are. Let's walk through some of this. So I'm going to start with Cameron, who was the first one to answer, a high performance coach for entrepreneurs. So the customer, the person is very clearly an entrepreneur, someone who is in a business, starting a business, and they want to be able to perform at a much higher level than what they are now. These are founders who have a lot of drive and a lot of go, but they may not have been able to channel that very well. So we understand that person is, a lot of founders tend to be in a position where they maybe this might be their second career. They might be in their 40s. They're not necessarily young. Some of them are actually established and they're self-funding themselves. So we get a picture of who they are. We can tell that story. I get it. You've come into your second stage of life where you actually want to do something different. You want to have impact on the world. The problem is, though, you've learned to be an employee all your life, but you've never learned to be an entrepreneur. You've got a bit of money set aside for this and you're ready to get going, but you're not yet sure what exactly you need to be doing. You certainly don't know how to take this great gem of an idea and polish it up into a diamond so that you can grow and get much bigger than what you are now to something that it might actually give you some freedom that you want, but you just don't have the steps. Well, that's kind of what we do. We provide the steps. So that's a story. Has a problem? Well, we know what the problem is. They don't have the tools to be able to become an entrepreneur or to be able to grow their business. So what we need to do then is say, well, I need to be able to go, then the problem would be you're stuck. You got to a certain point, you can't get any further. Your problem could be that you're feeling frustrated because things aren't moving as quickly as you thought they would. They might not even be moving at all. In fact, you got out into the market with this product or service you had and things were definitely not what you saw. So that's the problem they're coming to. Think about the problem as articulating to them all the baggage that they're coming in with. I get it. You know, you've been trying this thing for 6 months on your own and you're just getting nowhere. You've been going to networking meetings. You've been going to Facebook groups. You've been trying to plaster your stuff all over TikTok and nothing seems to be working. So what we need to do is step you out of marketing zone and get you into let's get everything right so we know and articulate exactly what it is you're putting out there in the market. There's the problem. The guide is, well, I'm an entrepreneur myself. I run this business. I understand what the whole situation is. I understand that it's hard. It's taking hours out of your time. You're not in a position right now where you can have a lot of life because your life is your business right now. I get it. I've been there. I've done that. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is some hope for that. But here, don't trust me and my story. Here's the story of these 3 people I've worked with. Step 1, this person had this, a problem, then they overcame it. Now they're here. Here's where they were. Here's where they are. So those stories you tell as part of the guide introduction. The plan then comes about, okay, I've got a 7-step plan to take you through. Now, I told this story at the beginning of this webinar, which is the 7 steps. I took you through them. You probably missed that in there because you hadn't been shown what these steps are, but I went and showed you that story. So what we said, the plan is then what those steps they're going to have to take. What is your package that you have? Step 1, book a discovery call where we'll discuss where you're at and where I can help. Step 2, I put forward a proposal and a plan to get you going to grow your business. Step 3, we execute on that. And step 4, we get to review you at the end of 6 months to see how you're feeling about the business and see if we're still working well together. Step 1, 2, 3, 4. You only need 3 or 4 steps. If you've got like 16 steps to how people work with you, it's too complex. Get it down to 3 or 4 so they can easily understand and easily digest that, a bite-sized piece that says this is not an overwhelming 16-step process. It's just 3 steps. I get that. Bundle lots of steps into 1, 2, or 3. And then you look at what calls them to the action. It can be something that says, you know, in the case of an entrepreneur, it can be your dreams are actually achievable, so step into them. So we're saying this, the call to action isn't book me. The call to action is to step into the mindset of that success. And it helps them avoid failure. Then I think it's really easy to tell what happens when businesses fail. So I don't need to tell you a story about that because there's plenty of examples out there of how things can go horribly wrong if they don't take the appropriate actions to step into that mindset of success and then keep themselves held back in a scarcity mindset or whatever the funky terms are these days for that kind of thing. And then that ultimately ends in success. What is the transformation that happens that you paint the picture of the hopeful future is a business that runs essentially itself, which you only need to work 4 hours a week on. You can sip cocktails by the pool in Bali. You can spend more time with your kids. You spend less time in your business, and the stuff you're doing is now working on the things that make your business work better and make more money for you, rather than the technical grind work. To be able to present that to them in a way that makes sense to them. Now, we've actually run out of time to be able to go and do lots of examples, but of all of you, but I would say then that each one of these stories that we have is full of stories of their own. So for instance, you know, that's a story. That's a story. 3, 4, 5, 6, they're each individually stories of their own. So you're not just having one great big grand story that covers everything. You've actually got 7 stories in there. And each one of those stories may have sub-stories, but the idea is to get into the process of storytelling. Rather than going, here's what I do, you go, here's who I am, something like that. So to wrap it up, be abundantly clear on who your customer is. It really makes a big difference. Really articulate what their problem is and what the problems are that could happen if they don't go through with it. Show how you can solve it for them. Show how you can then bring that about for them, and then call them to a bigger action, because that bigger action then is far more hopeful to the future than just simply specifics that say, oh, you're going to make an extra $100,000 this year. Call them into that bigger action, or step into a future where money doesn't appear to be an object, rather than saying, hey, make an extra $100,000, because we can imagine a future where money has is no problem for us, but we can't imagine an extra $100,000, because $100,000 doesn't even buy a house anymore these days. So I think, oh, $100,000 is not much at all. But a future where you're not worrying about money, geez, that sounds good to me. Hey. So if you're part of the digital solutions program, we could do this whole process together over 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 hour usually to get all the questionnaire, second hour to sort of bring it all together, third hour to then go and execute this kind of thing. If you think that storytelling is your problem and you'd like to be able to do better with that, certainly can do that through the program. $44 for 3 hours of coaching. Not a bad deal, really. This is the site. I think you know all about this site because you probably booked this webinar through it. So thank you so much for already being there. If you've run out of time on the program, there's certainly other options we can talk about. Just reach out to me through my personal contact details, dante@businessstation.com.au, through my LinkedIn is where I'm probably the most active. That's where I am a lot. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Where else am I? I'm everywhere. So maybe LinkedIn is a good start. Let's connect. Let's have a chat. And if you want to talk a bit more about storytelling or clarify in those points, please do reach out to me. A message on LinkedIn isn't going to cost you anything. So thank you so much for taking some time out of your business to work on your business today. I know that's a hard thing to do. An hour out of your day can be a hard thing to get. So thank you for taking that step. And let's connect. Let's see how far you can go with that storytelling to do something a little bit more significant than just simply buy my stuff, download my book, that sort of stuff. Thank you so much. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one of these webinars. I think I've got one next week.